Push the record button. Good morning, all. It is Thursday, March 3rd, and this is the public and recorded meeting of the Kubernetes community. So we will go do many fun things. Today's agenda includes a demo from the Weaveworks team on Kubernetes Anywhere. We're going to get a cloud native compute update from the Technical Oversight Committee Chair, Alexis Richardson. Chris Anasizik, the acting executive director of the CNCF, is also going to be on the call this morning. And we'll do that update because we're pretty close to having the Kubernetes project accepted into the Cloud Native Compute Foundation. So Alexis will tell us more about that at about 10 after. The Cloud Native, then we'll do a 1.2 release watch. TJ Golterman is going to tell us where we are with 1.2 and jump right to the 1.3 features. And then we'll do some SIG reports. Eric Toon has a couple of slides for us to talk about SIG Auth. And then if we have time, we can do a SIG cluster ops update. There are a couple of announcements in the notes as well. We'll get there as we get there if there's time. Otherwise, they're fine in the notes. So, Elon, are you game? Or sorry, Ilya, are you game to kick us off with the demo?
Sure, I can do that. Yeah, and I got a couple of slides. First, how do I share my screen here?
At the bottom, there should be a green button that says Share Screen.
Oh yeah, thank you. Entire screen. Okay. Share screen. Okay, you can see the slides.
We can, thank you.
And do you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, actually. Okay, well, yeah, I'd like to quickly go through the Kubernetes Anywhere project. That is something that allows people to deploy portable clusters in exactly the same fashion anywhere, whatever kind of environment they're running on. And it leverages VNet as the bootstrap and management network. It also uses VNet for pods, but that is not crucial to this project. So the problem outline for an ordinary person, the cluster architecture is pretty complex. There are decisions they have to make about deploying cluster, and there are a variety of existing examples on the internet which are hard to grasp. So the problem is that, yeah, essentially cluster deployment is kind of complex at this point in time. It's been improved, but we've seen many people produce different projects that do it yet in a different way. So we all know what Kubernetes architecture looks like. So I've got this slide here. We're all familiar with this. However, for a novice user, this is not exactly straightforward. Is somebody going to say something? Or? Okay, there's some noise in the background. Okay, so we're all familiar with this, but for a novice user, this is pretty complex. And well, they can consider various options to get it bootstrapped. And one of the obvious options is DNS, which works in GCE. Great, it works in Azure, but in Amazon, it's not that easy. Or in some kind of private cloud, it's close to impossible. So, and having faced all these deployment options, which cloud are they going to use? Maybe they actually want to use a PaaS. Maybe they want to run on bare metal. Maybe they want to use overlay network A, overlay network B. And what's the difference between L2 and L3? And for all the novice users, these are all very big questions. And they also have questions about distributions. And how are they going to automate deployment? Are they going to use Ansible, Puppet, or Chef, or something else, or Terraform maybe? And they still have to answer a bunch of questions that matters a bit more to themselves, such as how are they going to actually implement CI/CD on top of it? And yeah, maybe they actually want to use Mesos or whatever. I don't know. They still haven't even decided. So. Yeah, and things like Dockerizing databases. How is that? Or, well, I've got etcd now, and do I have to back it up? Or what do I have to do with it? Okay, well, a lot of questions there. And I believe that solving the Bootstrap provisioning problem is an important aspect to get people to solve the questions they want to be solving, really. So Kubernetes Anywhere aims at simplifying that. The goal is to dramatically simplify Kubernetes deployment, easier way to get started, scale out to any infrastructure without changing any configuration. Enabling complete portability, zero config, as I said, allow user to move or clone the entire cluster, make TLS setup fully transparent. The approach, we're using fully containerized deployment, so all the pieces are containerized, and we're using VMnet as a management network.
Anybody who's not on mute, can you guys go to mute, please? I tried to change most of you, but some of you I can't. Apologies, Ilya.
Thank you, Sarah. And the approach is to be able to integrate with any config management or provisioning tools. In a nutshell, given a set of Docker hosts, we decide to allocate 3 machines to run etcds. We run a proper 3-node etcd cluster. We allocate 1 machine to run master and 2 workers in this example. So on each of the machines you need to install Docker, and then once that's done, you install Vive and launch it like so. Install it and launch it like this. This is exactly the same on all machines. And then you need to make decisions where you run what images. And these are the Docker commands you run on the etcd machines. If you decided to set up a 3-node cluster, and all you need to care about is the etcd cluster size, and essentially you just enumerate them. Specify name etcd1, etcd2, and etcd3. We will create DNS records for these. And then on the master, we start the API server, controller manager, and scheduler like so. And then on the workers, we first start, we need to set up kubelet volumes because kubelet has rather complex bunch of things that you have to bind mount into the container if you're running containerized kubelet. So there's a helper that does kubelet volume setup. And next, we start kubelet itself using volumes from kubelet volumes. And then we run the proxy. Okay, and this is the same on all workers. That's it. Okay, so I'll just show you a really quick demo here. I am using Terraform and EC2 in this instance. This example is documented here in the top level README area, by the way. That's the repo is vworks Kubernetes Anywhere. And here at the top, there is a Terraform module usage example. And this is actually the setup that we are running in staging right now. Some of you might have seen that we posted on Kubernetes blog about our use case where we're using Kubernetes and EC2 to run our SaaS product. So here is the brief summary of the usage of the Terraform module. You just provide you declare this module, you provide the AWS keys, set the region, give it a cluster name, and select either secure or simple setup flavor, and you can also set the SSH key name and the instance types here. So I've done that. Right. This is my Terraform thing that is just the copy of this really. And there's a variables file that I'm going to show you with my AWS keys. And I ran Terraform apply. It took just about a minute. And now I have a cluster where I have logged in here. And I just double checked everything is fine. I have Vive mesh connected. And we have the DNS records for all the services. We have etcd1, etcd2, and etcd3. And then API server control manager and scheduler. And this is not using self-hosting. We run all the service components as separate containers. which just makes things a bit easier to understand. Self-hosting is great, but I'm not entirely sure if it makes things a lot easier for the user. There's a toolbox script that you can run. Oh, by the way, this has TLS enabled. And the way TLS is working is actually through volume, so what Docker calls data containers. And in the CC2 based example, I push these data containers to my supposedly safe Amazon container registry that I can give. I can set fine-grained permissions on, and only master node can pull the container image that contains the server TLS key and all the things that I want to keep safe, and the nodes can only pull their own images for them. So do take a look at the README. The TLS stuff is documented here in more details. And here I've got the tools container, kubectl get nodes. I've got all the nodes running. Okay, and I should have some pods because part of the provisioning process I've done that. Is it? No, nothing there. Okay, well, we can create the guestbook app and see it all. Create a namespace or namespace already exists. Okay. What have I missed? All namespaces. That's interesting. Okay, well, it sounds like a demo syndrome. I might have updated the images very recently. Do we have time left?
Actually, Ilya, I'm going to have you wrap it up quickly and we can potentially revisit. We have a really full agenda today trying to get through the CNCF conversation and the 1.3 update, or 1.2 and 1.3 updates.
Sure.
And we can circle back to questions for you at the end if we've got time.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Let's do that.
Okay, thanks so much for showing us that. And we saw your GitHub with all of the instructions. Can you make sure that that gets dropped into the links, or sorry, into the note document?
Great, yeah.
We have it in there.
Already.
I'll be presenting at KubeCon next week as well on the first day before noon.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, so next up on our list today, and this is part of why I wanted to get to some of the other items on the agenda, is the Cloud Native Compute Foundation update. I saw Alexis. Do we also have Chris here on the line? Maybe not yet. Okay. So Alexis, are you game to make an update about where we are with the Cloud Native Compute Foundation and what the Technical Oversight Committee is doing right this very moment?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm Alexis, everybody. There is now a Cloud Native Computing Foundation. It is part of the Linux Foundation, and it is, for want of a better phrase, a bit like the Apache Foundation, but for cloud native. The idea of setting this up was to place Kubernetes into a neutral foundation so that other companies than Google could contribute to it. Now, some of you may think that's unnecessary. Others may think it's necessary, but it's something that really, for large companies, is seen as quite important. The Google team has written a piece of paper that says that if the technical committee of the CNCF accepts Kubernetes, then Kubernetes will be moved by Google into the foundation. This means that copyright and trademarks currently owned by Google for Kubernetes would move to the Linux Foundation, and then it would become a Linux Foundation project inside the Cloud Native Foundation. And there will be other projects inside the Cloud Native Foundation. What those projects are and how they are run is still up for grabs, okay? That doesn't mean that there is no plan, but it does mean that we're going to be working with the Kubernetes community to make sure that we have the right set of rules for Kubernetes in place. There is no idea of trying to come up with some crazy set of new stuff that is imposed from the Linux Foundation to this project. This project really is the reason the Cloud Native Foundation has been set up in the first place, It will be the first project in the foundation. We hope there'll be many others. Just like Apache started with one web server project, is now the home of many, many other things that nobody predicted at the time. Okay? So I'm happy to take a few questions, or whatever Sarah, Brian, I see Joe on the call as well, want to talk about. I'll do my best to be forthcoming. We're in the middle of a vote right now inside the TOC to accept or not Kubernetes into the foundation. If that sounds odd, it's only because the vote is happening by email, so it's asynchronous. It hasn't completed yet. I hope it will be complete by next week. Okay.
So the other thing that I'm working on is a frequently asked questions about what it might mean to be a Cloud Native Compute Foundation project. So I'll be taking notes also, in addition to the notes, about what specific questions around that exist. So anything we see here that as a question that we don't have an answer to, we can go back to the Technical Oversight Committee, the Governing Board, and get answers and get this all very much more published. Because we're, as is traditional in technology, we're building the bus as we fly it. So we will figure out what this looks like. So what are your questions?
So I have some questions. There was an email thread a long time ago about some details like the CLA for under CNCF. Has that been sorted out? Should I resurrect that email thread?
Okay, so the CNCF was set up with a charter, which I believe is public and on the CNCF site. In the charter, I believe that it says, correct me if I'm wrong, that the contributions model, the default contributions model for CNCF projects will be the Developer Certificate of Origin, DCO, which is also used by many Linux projects, and I believe it is used by, hey Joe, I agree, I think it's much better. It's used by many of the companies participating, like my company, Weaveworks, use it, Khoros use it, I think Docker use it as well. Google has used a CLA up until now, which is a more traditional copyright assignment mechanism. Joe is just demonstrating on the screen in the corner what happens to developers when they're asked to sign a CLA. These days, it's seen as a bit of friction. So we hope to have a lower friction contribution model. If you Google for OpenStack CLA versus DCO, you'll see the debates the OpenStack community went through and the pain they went through when they realized that CLA wasn't getting them any contributions. Now, if a project insists that it wants to have a CLA, then I think the CNCF rules may be gracious enough to allow that. But my expectation currently is that we'll be moving to a Developer Certificate of Origin model, which should lead to no changes in terms of what the committers and project leads have to do, but it should lead to a cost of contribution for the average developer.
Didn't Node also go through a CLA to DCO transition, I believe?
I'm not an expert on what happened with Node, but if you read there was a really good post last week on Medium by this guy, Mikhail, who's involved in the Node transition, talking about some of the rules they set up, and they seem to have gone really out of their way to encourage contributions. So I would not be surprised to hear that, Joe.
So,
yeah.
Go ahead, Rob.
I can speak to the OpenStack transition. Because OpenStack really didn't have a lack of contributor problem for this, and 99% of OpenStack contributions are corporate funded, so the CLA was actually not considered a hurdle for them. So I mean, the nice thing about DCO is it makes it much easier for individuals to act. The downside is that they can contribute code that their company hasn't given them permission to add. That's the big downside, is that you could have somebody individually make a decision that their corporation doesn't support and then have to roll back that code. Has there been some provision or expectation to handle that contingency?
In as much as there are things in the charter on this topic, yes. I'm trying to remember exactly what it says, and I can't. It's quite complex, as you can imagine, Rob.
I know firsthand. Yeah, I think DCO is a better model from after lengthy discussions in the OpenStack Foundation about it. As long as you start there, once companies are afraid that they're at risk, the lawyers win.
So I mean, there's nothing stopping a participating company volunteering to write a CLA. As you say, Rob, the DCO is really oriented towards
on
the
this, but
passing
maybe
developer.
I will resurrect that thread and we can take that online.
Yeah, I would suggest, I'm in favor of the DCO. I just would suggest that for developers who work for companies, that there be some way to make sure that the company can be on, we can actually have companies say that they are on board.
Yeah.
With DCO contributions. They don't need a CLA, but it just provides that extra
Cool.
comfort for both parties, right? What we really don't want is developers getting in trouble for contributing and their companies being mad. We
do not want developers getting in trouble. Hey, Sarah, are you taking copious notes? Because I think we should.
I am taking notes, and we also have a community note taker for the broader picture, but I'm taking them for specifically for the frequently asked questions.
Thanks for that DCO question. Okay.
So
Other questions?
I have another question, but just last thing on the DCO for me, the good thing about the DCO is that it's actually, if I'm reading it correctly, it's not a copyright assignment. So that means that the code base can't be dual licensed in the future, which makes it a lot more, it doesn't feel like you're giving anything away as much. Different question. So like you mentioned the Apache model. Last I checked in with the CNCF, there was a question of whether the CNCF was going to be opinionated about choosing one technology as being sort of common across the umbrella of projects, or sort of letting 1,000 flowers bloom and competing projects, which is Apache's more of the sort of allowing competing projects, whereas I think there are places where we need to just pick something and encourage people to standardize on it.
Sure, I think there's going to be a mix. I mean, when I say think about the foundation as being like Apache, that's more of a kind of shorthand for, it is a foundation. It has open source projects in it. It is not, for example, a standards body. If you meet somebody who says, I hear the CNCF is a talking shop for architecture standards, politely turn your back and walk away until they get it, because it's not going to be that. It's going to be about open source running code, and that's going to happen fast. In terms of the debate between, a free-for-all and some sort of privilege of specific projects, I think that that is not a settled topic. I personally am much more in favor of a free-for-all, but I am just one voice in that. I would be perfectly happy to have competing projects in lots and lots of areas. But and I'm not alone in thinking this. Having said that, I think there's going to be several very important areas where there will be strong social forces pushing people together. Let me give you an example. So I am lucky enough to have briefly worked with the Google team, along with Koros, VMware, and Calico at Metaswitch on a network interface definition for the Kubernetes plugins project. This started out being called something called CNI. You might have seen some blog posts about it from the Docker team and previously from Tim on the Google team. So, CNI is a networks interface for any container that is also being applied to Kubernetes as an orchestration technology. I can't see any motivation for having two CNI projects. In fact, that would be really dumb. So I think it's very, very, very unlikely that there'll be that kind of thing. So in as much as there are things that look like interfaces, interoperability guidelines, those are very likely to be convergent. I think that, on the other hand, when it comes to things like orchestration or scheduling, you may find that there is room for different approaches according to different use cases. So one of my personal criticisms of Kubernetes as it stands today is it's quite big and complicated. It would be nice to have a few smaller things that were a little bit easier to get started with. Anyway, that's really where things stand.
So
You just hang on a second. I'm just going to mute and I'll be right back.
So I will step up for a minute and describe the TOC makeup and the broader picture. So there is a governing board that is seated with members of the Cloud Native Compute Foundation. So people that have put in money to participate and help guide as a governance board. The real meat of the work happens with the Technical Oversight Committee, which has just is just being seated now. Alexis is the chair of that technical oversight committee, and right now there are 6 other members. Now these members of the technical oversight committee were nominated and then voted on. 5 others, sorry, right, 6 total. And there are 5 other members. They were nominated and then voted on by the governing board. Now, given that the governing board just put in money, not just, but primarily put in money to get this governing board started, we knew that the technical oversight committee would not be complete. So the technical oversight committee gets to build in 2 more seats that they choose. Now, as an example, and I know that we've had this question internally, right now there is no one from Google on the technical oversight committee, or more directly from the Kubernetes community. There are related community members, but not directly. And that is one of the things that the technical oversight committee is tasked with fixing. So there are 2 more seats. The technical oversight committee says, we know we have holes in this space and we need expertise in these places. So they fill 2 more seats. And then there is an end user seat on the technical oversight committee, which is the end user membership of the Cloud Native Compute Foundation gets to nominate 1 more seat on the technical oversight committee to give us really that end user vision and visibility. Now, given that we have not made the end user membership broad at this point yet, we're asking the TOC to make an interim appointment of someone who is very user focused or use focused, because they are users. So we will have 3 more seats that are seated in the TOC in the next probably week to 3. Is that about right, Alexis? Yeah, okay. So we would expect those seats to also be filled out, and then we will have a full technical oversight committee wherein the TOC starts defining what a lot of these, what it means to be a Cloud Native Compute Foundation project sort of things look like, and dig in with the Kubernetes community as the first project being accepted into finding the best practices, the common interfaces, the common overlays of what we can do as developer communities. But the intent is not, yes? You want to come back in?
Sarah, I only have a couple more minutes to stay on the call tonight. So would it be possible to ask you if there's any more really pressing questions and items that you want to raise today?
I'd say that's to the community.
Absolutely. Everybody.
I have I don't know if it's pressing, but it's material. Is there a decision on how to govern the brand from using Kubernetes and using Cloud Native as brands as part of this? Has that been discussed?
Right. This is under discussion now. We're looking for what I would call a common sense solution, and not something that makes everybody feel there's been some enormous contortion. So this arises in some quite practical ways and is slightly constrained by some quite practical concerns. For example, it turns out that on GitHub, you can have organizations, but you cannot have sub-organizations. So you can't have a meta-organization called Cloud Native on GitHub and then split that into a Kubernetes org and blah, 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 other orgs for other projects. That is like really super irritating.
Yes.
Yes.
We're going to try and figure this out. And honestly, this would be a good time to appeal for constructive suggestions and ideas. Send them to Sarah or to me or to Chris Anischik or anybody else that you know is involved. There is a public mailing list for all of these things, which you can join, send stuff to. So go for it.
We'll make sure that gets into the notes. Anyone else have questions for Alexis before he dashes off? Because it is dinner time in his time zone.
And bath time. And I just got a food delivery, so I got to go.
All sorts of excitement.
Anyone?
Thanks a lot, Alexis.
Thanks so much, Alexis. We will bring more. If any other questions come up during this meeting, we will certainly share them with you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Very cool. All right.
Are they going to move to open meetings for some of the next CNCF pieces?
So the Cloud Native, the Technical Oversight Committee meetings are open if you want to participate in them, as is their mailing list. So it's something that I can connect people with, or we can put a link into the notes.
Our discussion is not on the open mailing list, however.
Never is, but much meat never happens that way, as we know, even within this community. So in every community, a lot of that happens on back channel, but you get to know the players by watching the mailing lists.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of viewpoints and who to lobby. How about that?
This is good. This is great progress. I'm excited to see it. I've got a lot. As you know me well enough, Sarah. I have a long list of questions about some of these.
Send them my way. I'm making
harder issues. Okay, I need to think them through.
Yep, please do. Any of you send me questions, because over the next few weeks we'll be building out a FAQ as to what this means and what we expect fundamentally won't change initially, but may over longer periods. The whole point, even straight down from the governing board, is light oversight until and where we find scalable things that work to make the communities and the projects go faster and better. And over in the governing board meetings, it was said that we do not want to slow these projects down. So. Yeah,
I like and would love to see more clarification on the difference between an implementation project and a specification project. I think that's a really insightful distinction.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that would I think of the things I would ask is can we clarify that? Can we actually formalize it? Because that might be the difference between where you just want to move really fast and where you actually want to slow things down.
Right. And where you have interfaces. Awesome.
It goes along with the composability discussion you and I had last week.
Yeah. Speaking of discussions off lists, moving on rapidly.
I'm trying to raise it and document it so people can see it.
There you go. So I'm going to jump onto, like I said, we have a really full meeting, so I'm going to jump onto 1.2 and then 1.3. Although, as I said, any questions can come to me, things that should go into the frequently asked questions about this transition. I know it's been coming pretty much since Kubernetes 1.0 was announced, but I'm happy to facilitate those. So TJ, 1.2 release watch.
Yeah, real quick. Basically all this info went out yesterday to the Kubernetes dev group. So this will be a little bit of a reiteration of that, but it's worth making clear. So for 1.2, we've been having 3 times a week meetings to look at the milestone burn down and look. Nowadays, we're actually looking individually at every bug that is left. And we've determined that the important bugs that we still have to fix are not complex, at least in terms of dependencies and ability to cherry pick them if needed. And that the flakes have been going down. They're not perfect, but they're much better. And the submit queue is running smoother over the last several days. So that's all good data to say that we can cut our branch and declare beta very soon. So we picked tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So morning for some of us. And so that is when we will branch and create a beta release. So anything that gets in before that point will be in both head and 1.2. Any code that you get in afterwards should either go to head if it just needs to be in 1.3, and that's fine. But if it needs to go in 1.2, you need to make sure that it is properly cherry picked and makes its way in.
And given where the submit queue and processing is, even though it's improved, if you have something today that you want to make sure gets in before the branch, please ping it to somebody.
Yeah, what's the
They're on call at KS-on call.
Okay, there you go.
And we can manually merge if that's the right thing to do to sort of jump you in line with you.
I will point out for people worried about the submit queue, a whole bunch, there are 31 PRs right now, that Jenkins is messed up and will never complete, and they will never go into the merge queue ever. Everything that's targeted for 1.2, everything that has a looks good to me, Jeff managed to get cleared. But if you have a PR that isn't targeted for 1.2 and doesn't have a looks good to me, and your end-to-end tests have been sitting there for hours or days, you're gonna have to ask the bot to retest them yourself. Just for anybody who's got PRs hanging that way.
So Eric, I saw that I think I have a PR that matched that criteria, and you told it to retest it, and it's been an hour and no test results have come. So are we sure that retesting is really fixing it yet?
You can send me the number in Slack. We threw a whole bunch of PRs at Jenkins, and it's chewing as best it can.
Okay, cool.
So an hour is not unreasonable right now. Right now, anything over 2.5 hours would probably be never going to come out.
Cool.
Anything more on 1.2?
No, just that basically once we branch, we're sort of in final watch for release. I believe for 1.0 and 1.1, it was around 2 weeks-ish. So I think 1.5 to 2 weeks is probably what we're looking at. But basically, once the numbers say we're there, both on testability and number of remaining blockers in the milestone, we will release and we'll be done. And then one thing that Brian actually tagged onto that email is that when we branch for beta, there's also going to be a user doc freeze. And so that the user docs are the non-generated ones, the ones under docs, user guide, admin, or getting started guides. And that is so that we can move repos cleanly, or?
Yeah, we're moving the docs. We discussed this in a previous community meeting. We're moving the docs to a separate repo under the Kubernetes org, and there are a bunch of benefits to that. In the announcement on Kubernetes Dev, I posted a link to the proposal which discusses those benefits. But anyway, that's what we're doing. So we're going to block any PRs that touch those directories in the submit queue automatically. Eric was kindly enough to write a new munger to auto-label those PRs, and this submit queue will be watching for those labels. Additionally, I think PRs that, so anyway, we're still working out all of the logistics for that move, because there are a bunch of semi-manual transformations that need to be done to the docs when we copy them over. And we need to leave forwarding links in place and things like that. So to give us time to do all that stuff, we need to freeze the docs.
So just to clarify, let's say that I find an error in the docs, or I find some missing docs or whatever after Friday. Do I get them cherry picked into 1.2, or do they end up in
the docs aren't going to be in 1.2. So the 1.2 docs are not going to be in 1.2. So you'll be stuck until the doc freeze is over. Hopefully it will not be long.
Because it will be moved to a separate repo.
Yes, that was my question. So they will end up in the new repo in some.
They will end up in the new repo, not in the release branch.
Okay.
I mean,
the release branch, to be clear, will be wrong. Or
the ones in the release branch are going to be the ones that we have today, and that will give us a snapshot if we screw anything up.
Yeah.
Right. And but in the future, the home of origin of docs will be this new repo.
Okay, makes sense.
Any other questions on 1.2? We keep moving along, and we'll talk about all the features and fun in it at KubeCon next week as well.
Actually, I have a question about 1.2. We have some cases where there are scripts that reference things by version. I'm thinking, for example, in the cluster Ubuntu install scripts, there are mentions of versions of things that are typically some number of weeks to months out of date. Is there any vision for how stuff like that gets updated?
I think Cluster Ubuntu is a community contributed, so it'll be up to the person who contributed that or someone new to fix that. Some of the startup scripts the core project maintains, and some are not, and Ubuntu is not.
Okay, so for the core ones, is there some scheme for getting the references to updated to 1.2 in the 1.2 release?
The core ones work from head, or I don't know what the process is, but they will be updated to 1.2 when 1.2 is released. So that would be like AWS and GCE.
Thank you.
Is there any documentation of which of the scripts are core versus non-core?
Eric, do you know if there's documentation on that?
I think if you go to the docs getting started page, the root README in there enumerates if it's community or not, and it'll tell you who the community owner is if it's not core maintained.
Derek is correct.
Awesome. All right. David, are you on the phone or on the digital communication device?
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect. Are you ready to do 1.3?
Yes. So 1.2, that's
old news.
Old news. 1.3 is new hotness. It's time to happen. So the community's asked for a lot better transparency about what different folks are working on in the different time frames. What I'd like to share is what we at Google consider to be the things that we're going to put the majority of our effort to making sure that we get across the line between 1.3. It is certainly not the only things that we're going to do, and it's certainly not something that we alone are going to do. We would love help from the community and things like that. But these are the things that we think would make for a quite compelling 1.3 release. I hesitate to call them blockers, but we're certainly going to do our best to get them over the line. So in 1.3, we at Google are going to focus on getting 5 things over the line. The first is what's currently called pet set, coming up, trying to figure out a better name for it, but something around legacy application support. There's already a proposal out for it right now by Red Hat. Thanks so much for the guys there. And we're going to put time behind that. The second is cluster federation, aka Kubernetes. This is actually a very large one, so we don't expect to get all of it over the line by 1.3, but we think we can make some pretty significant progress against it. We're going to dedicate time to trying to get to 2 to 3x at a minimum the number of nodes we currently support. Ideally between 2 and 5,000 total nodes under support by Kubernetes. There's quite a bit of investigation that needs to go on here about what's realistic and not. So there's going to be some work understanding exactly what our target is. We're going to integrate a number of different IAM solutions for identity and management and ACLs, support for cluster auto-scaling, allowing Kubernetes to provide the signals to your underlying cluster to scale. Obviously, we'll implement that on GKE, and we would love other folks to wire it up for other clouds. And then finally, some improvements to scheduled job to make running things on a timed basis better. So that's the set of things that we think are the top priorities that we're absolutely going to allocate people's time to here at Google. And we would love people in the community to help out on those and things like that. But those are the ones that we consider to be top of mind. There are some additional contributions that we certainly have in mind that are, for lack of a better term, nice to have. We're not going to consider them to be like necessarily blockers for the next release, but we'd love to make progress against them. These include things like our distributed test dashboard, improving our auto-scale metrics, simplified configuration and setup, improving scheduling and scheduling decisions, improving the way that we allow people to test their nodes and potentially bring your own nodes, including your own custom images, things like that. Improving the way that Docker Compose interacts with Kubernetes. Ideally, we'd have a kind of transparent solution for that. And a series of other things. Reliable cluster setup is another one that I want to highlight, making it very, very easy to set up your own cluster no matter where it is, with or without the use of KubeUp.
So this is an enormous portion of what Google does is the feature bit, but the next chunk is the part that is, I suspect, just as interesting to the community, which is now we ask you all to decide what you're working on, what you want to get into 1.3, because some of our resource allocation over the next 3 months has to be to help review, to help work with others, to become reviewers, to grow your expertise and ability, potentially refactor something so that what you can do or what you want to do can be done. So we need that input as well.
Correct. So this is, again, we're trying to be as transparent as possible at the early days here. and just letting you know what we and we alone are planning on working on. We should expect that there's actually quite a bit of stuff that we would, not work on that would also make it into the product. We are very excited to support that and would love that transparency. If you have a company need and want to move your company forward and require a certain feature, great. Tell us. Tell us how we can help enable that, enable your contributions and things like that. Give us feedback into the features that we are working on, all those various things like that. So the net is that we're trying to be transparent and trying to do this very iteratively. The list that I provided here, we will kind of bubble up into an artifact that we make public, and that will not be a Google-owned artifact by any stretch of the imagination. We will fully expect that other people will add things to the next feature and add in. And as you see there, we'll add Red Hat's meeting in the next couple weeks. I actually don't know whose alias that is, but is going to be working on workflow. So again, this is the purpose of us just putting a stake in the ground on the things that we're working on. We really just want the community to understand what you can expect from us, and then other people can plug in.
So we have asked for those lists from you all, and just so we can continue to discuss it and do resource planning across the whole of the community. We've asked for that list at our next meeting, which is actually in 2 weeks. There's no meeting next week because of KubeCon and time zones and all the fun that is going on with 1.2 and trying to get it kicked out the door. So that's March 17th. And we can have a longer discussion. We can bring lists. We can make space for that next time. So if there aren't any questions, we did have a request for a SIG Auth update, and Eric is here to do that. So are there questions?
Yes, I'm going to make a real brief comment from the SIG testing meeting a couple of weeks ago. Sarah, I believe you showed up and shared with us the wonderful news that federated testing was going to be a priority, like above Kubernetes, I think was the phrase. And so I understand this was early in the process and there have been lots of discussions since then, but in the interest of transparency, I was wondering if somebody could shed a little light on what has caused distributed testing to sort of fall into the nice to have bucket.
David, I quoted you on that, more important than Kubernetes.
So I guess my take would be that it is orthogonal to Kubernetes core is all I was trying to suggest. The things that I mentioned are the things that are core to Kubernetes. You can implement a distributed test, and we fully expect to implement a distributed test in the 1.3 timeframe, totally orthogonally to like Kubernetes 1.3 shipping. And so I guess that was it. I didn't. You're right. I did describe it as nice to have, but it is absolutely of critical importance that by 1.3 we have it out.
I think by placing it, by putting it high on the priority list, it makes it really clear that it is a priority, and that there's only, even with a wide community, there's only a limited number of brains and fingers to do work. That not having that running will be a release blocker for 1.3. I think that's the important position that I would strongly urge the Google folks to take on this, and I think you'll find that you get an enormous amount of support from the rest of the community on that.
I don't want to speak on behalf of Eric, who is our test lead, and I don't think he's on the call right now. I would be absolutely stunned if it was not out long before 1.3 released. But
I think we're hearing a request to put a stake in the ground and put it on the list for 1.3, though.
I understand. I hear that, Bob. I'm not going to do that on this call. I will talk to our guys and get back to you.
Okay. Just again, for clarity, we were very pleased after the last SIG test meeting when it seemed like you had put the stake in the ground on this. So this seems like a retrenchment that's very worrisome.
I would not call this a retrenchment in any way, shape, or form. I literally have not spoken to Eric. So
okay.
Please only take it as a lack of communication and not a retrenchment.
All right. If it's not, again, though, if it's not showing up on the main release priority, then I really worry that treating it as this orthogonal other thing means that it doesn't really get the priority and attention that it deserves. So,
Understood.
Yep.
thanks.
Okay. Trust me, I will continue to be the burr under saddles here about that one. I actually almost interrupted David to say, and this too, right?
So I just wanted to do one other quick thing, and then I don't want to take up any time from SIG updates. A while ago, I think I had sort of asked that SIGs provide updates here, and maybe even a little more frequently than on a weekly basis. So I've started posting the SIG testing weekly meeting notes to Kubernetes dev, preferably the day of. I'm just sort of putting a call out there that if others want to do that, that's super helpful to sort of keep up with what's going on.
There's also a list of all of the working documents from this different SIGs. So this is more of the pull model as opposed to the push. I agree the push model is better. So there's a list of all the working documents in the SIGs on the wiki. So you can go peek there, but I think the push method is great too. All right, let's jump to Eric, and then we will see what we have time for after Eric and the SIG Auth.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see my screen share?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. First, I want to thank everyone who made contributions in the auth area to 1.2. I tried to list everyone. Apologies if I missed anyone, but great community support here. Here's an overview of changes that are going to be in 1.2. Excuse me. We have an OpenID Connect token authentication. It's not totally production ready, but there's definitely something there for people to poke around. If you're not familiar with OpenID Connect, it's an authentication standard that Google and IBM and Auth0 and I had a list somewhere of 10 other people support, but it looks to be a good option for authentication. CoreOS Dex supports it. We have some improvements to the authentication documentation. In terms of images, community added ECR, that's the Amazon Docker repo thing, support for that. And there's a lot of complaints about docker config.json not working on Kubernetes, and that's fixed in 1.2, I believe. With secrets, you can now, there's new secret types that help you validate that you've constructed your secret right, including docker config.json and other types. And you can now consume secrets in environment variables in 1.2. In terms of authorization, we now have the ability to list the groups that a user belongs to in the token file, so you can use those groups to do authorization. We made some improvements to our sort of first version of authorization, which we call ABAC. That is still useful for bootstrapping and will continue to support for a while, but eventually we want to replace that with a new thing. I'll talk about that in a second. And there are some beginning steps to upstream a new authorization model. Talk about that for 1.3. Webhook authorization was added, and this is a model where the API server can call out to some REST service that you implement that does any kind of authorization you check. That interface is now formalized, and we're hoping new authorization contributions, for the most part, will come through this webhook model. We also have work in progress to add something called pod security policy. And this is a way to have authorization. When I just say that alone, I mean who can make objects of type pod or of type secret or read them or write them. That's a sort of a very generic type of authorization. Pods are very specific, and so we have very specific policies around pods, like what user can you run in, what SE Linux types do you need to have, that type of thing. We have an object called pod security policy that's going to have that very pod specific authorization rules. That's not finished. So my picks, and this is not final, but these are the things I am hoping we see in 1.3, and I'm open to community suggestions on what else we want to take. But my picks are completing this OpenID Connect. It needs a refresh flow and client-side support. A proxy authentication for people that want to put Apache as the authorization as a proxy in front of API server. This would be great for on-prem people that want to integrate with the many types of Apache auth modules. I'd like to upstream OpenShift's authorization and make that not required, but the default when you set up a Kubernetes cluster on-prem or on one of many of the cloud providers. and I want to get the pod security policy wired in and working so people can control pod security policy on a namespace and user and group level. Any questions?
When does SIG Auth meet, and where can we find more information?
So far, there's been limited requests from the community. I've asked the community to suggest what they would like to work on and suggest ideas, and I haven't had a lot of activity. Most of the community activity is in the form of PRs. If someone asks to have a meeting, I will have one.
Okay. Any other questions?
Is there a label that's going on their PR on those PRs that I can sort of sign up on so I get copied on all of them?
I try to put area security on them, but I would say that's about 60% success rate. If that's important to you, I can try to be more vigilant about putting that label on them. It'll be area/security.
Okay, yeah, because I'd like to keep up on it, and that seems to be a good way to sort of monitor what's happening in a specific domain. So
I'll make a note to try to keep those labels more up to date.
All right, thank you, sir.
Or maybe we could create like a SIG Auth label.
That would be fine too if you'd prefer, and we can make security just be about vulnerabilities if you want.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Regardless, add me to the list. I'll do a proposal.
Okay.
Another idea, just off the top of my head, even if you don't have regular meetings, having a special interest group and perhaps sending out a bi-weekly update or whatever, saying this is what the current status on authorization authentication.
Yeah, we have a Slack channel, and when people ask questions, I'm there, and I can try to send updates to that more often.
Yeah, more like a sort of a digest, a sort of every several weeks digest of what the status is, along the lines of what you've given here. But not everyone attends these things. And some people have specific interests.
Okie dokie.
Anybody else with questions? We've got 2 minutes left, and I've got 2 announcements if we don't have questions for Eric. Thank you, Eric.
There was a question in the chat about authorization.
You mentioned ABAC would be replaced by something. Is that something OpenShift Auth Z? Or succeeded, not replaced?
I was just typing a response to the group chat. Yes, I think we'll probably keep ABAC indefinitely because it's useful for bootstrapping and for simple use cases. But in the future, once OpenShift Auth Z is upstreamed, we will encourage people that should be who do not have another option to use that.
Cool. All right, I'll jump to my announcements very quick. I get all sorts of asks for use cases, people who might want to speak, etc. So if anyone's in the Boston or New England area that has a good use case for Kubernetes, reach out to me, please, because Container Days Boston is coming up, and they're looking for speakers. And then the Open Container Day CFP is open until the March 21st, and this is happening at OzCon. So the links are in the notes. Thank you all. Thank you to Ilya and Eric and TJ and David and everyone who spoke, because I think I missed someone. Yes, Alexis, but he's not here. So have a great week, and we will see you in 2 weeks on the 17th.